Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Just really quick before we get any further, my studio is about 90 degrees today, and there is no way that I was going to record or do anything in my studio if I didn't have my window open. So if you hear an occasional car go by or a motorcycle go by, I apologize. But that's the only thing I can do right now until it cools off in here. Before we get on with today's upload, a couple links I'd like to share. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch to help this channel to continue to grow and go. All of those links are in the description below. I also have a second channel for creepypasta, fanfiction, and scary voice acting. Stories that, well, they really don't fit on this channel. Now, if that's anything that you're into, follow that link and give those stories a listen. You may just like what you hear. Now I've taken enough of your time, guys. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? A couple of things I'm going to address before we get any further. I've been getting a lot of questions in the comment section and emails asking about William/Victor. As of right now, I don't know what is going on. The last time that I spoke with him, he was in Colorado. Well, no, excuse me. I'll get to that point in a second. When he was forced to retire, he went to his home in Colorado. His first night there, there were some unwanted visitors, and there was a verbal threat made to him by a werewolf. The second night was the night that we had him on, and during that recording, there were 2 that he cited lurking around his property. The first night there was 11. Later on that night, he ended up seeing roughly 17. The third night, he ended up witnessing about the same amount, but flashlights, which means handlers were with him, or with them, excuse me. So he left. He is, as of now, I guess, in hiding. I know that he went to 2 different states, and the last thing I heard from him was that he would be hiding until further notice. So that's about all I know as of right now. I also stated that I wanted to bring this channel to new levels. I wanted to revisit past subscriber encounters, re-narrate them, and then hopefully have those subscribers hear that narration again and have them come on the show. I have 3 encounters that I picked out today, and hopefully after I narrate them and put this upload out, I'm going to email them and see if they would be willing to share their encounter in their words. Also, I have a subscriber reached out to me just recently in the northern East Coast, and she has 2 really amazing encounters, and one actually includes younger than a juvenile, because when we think of juvenile, we still think huge. This was either a Dogman or a werewolf, about the size of a 12-year-old boy. She is working on those encounters. I'm going to narrate them, and hopefully after I do that, she is willing to come on and share those encounters and talk a little bit more about what has happened. Remember, it's about building courage. These encounters have been stuffed away for so long that people don't want to talk about them. So hopefully she reaches out and shares what has happened with her encounters and experiences. So tonight's first subscriber encounter revisited. The UFO phenomenon seems to really get everywhere. It's associated with Sasquatch sightings, bizarre entities that would otherwise be called demons, and now seemingly the nightmarish Dogman that supposedly haunt the forests of North America. It was early June of 2016 in southern New York, and three friends, Jamie, Dan, and an unnamed witness, decided to go camping on a mountain. Apparently, they did not know if they were technically allowed to do this. But there were a lot of fire pits in the area, and so they did it anyway. They set up their tent and got their fire going, and just sat there having a few beers and bitching about the women. All of a sudden, the woods became completely silent. They couldn't even hear a cricket. And it apparently felt like there was going to be a lightning storm because static electricity could be felt through the air. The hairs on the back of the unnamed witness's neck stood up, according to Jamie. The air was humming. Immediately after this, there was a deep bass noise, and a light flashed up in the distance and illuminated the whole forest. It looked like when a really big firework explodes for the first few seconds, but it lasted for about a minute before it split up into 2 or 3 lights and shot back down into the trees. You could see the lights glowing out into the woods, and then there was a big gust of wind, and it was gone. Everything smelled like it had just rained, but it never did. The witnesses didn't know what to do, but decided that it was likely a meteor, so they went back to talking amongst themselves. At about 2 in the morning, they decided to get some sleep. The unnamed witness and Jamie slept in a tent, but Dan decided to sleep by the fire. Roughly an hour later, the witnesses were woken up by Dan shaking them and saying that there was something big watching the camp. The creature was about 50 feet away from the fire, according to Dan, and apparently thought that it might be a bear. But it was standing on 2 legs and bobbing backward and forward, as if it was trying to get a better look at them. While Dan was talking to the witnesses about this, all 3 of them heard a loud scream that apparently sounded like a pig being slaughtered, but was deeper and made the witnesses' ears ring. Apparently, 3 or 4 more creatures came running toward the campsite as the embers from the fire kicked up and landed on the tent. The dogmen kept running up to the tent and then promptly running back into the woods. Every once in a while, one of them would scream again and pull on one of the tent poles, dragging the whole tent a foot or 2. By now, the whole tent was collapsed on one side, and the witnesses were screaming as loud as they could. Suddenly, everything went quiet again, and the witnesses ran towards their truck as fast as they could and hit the gas. When they were just about to leave, they saw one of the dogmen illuminated in the road by the truck headlights. At this point, the witnesses attempted to gun it and drive the vehicle straight past the creature, but it then straightened up and puffed out its chest. The witness estimates that the creature was around 8 feet tall and had dark gray hair all over its body except for the front, where the hair was a white or yellow. The face looked like a dog, but not really. Apparently, the witness knows what Bigfoot looks like, and this was different. The dogman didn't even move when the witnesses drove at it, and they had to swerve the truck around it to avoid running it over. They drove back down the mountain and parked the truck at a gas company parking lot and considered telling the local police, but were discouraged because they didn't know if they were camping somewhere where they shouldn't have been. In the morning, after the witnesses had sobered up, they drove back to the campsite to find that their property had vanished, including the tent and the cooler. Tonight's second encounter. Now, this subscriber I am going to diligently work on to get him on the program so he can explain exactly what was going on. This is a very interesting encounter. Saturday, 6:30 in the morning, 2004, outside of Crawley, Louisiana. Foggy morning, hunting along an abandoned set of railroad tracks with my hunting dog, Hunter Bone, a German Shepherd trained to kill in the Louisiana bayou. Hence comes something out of the fog walking between the railroad tracks. Then, standing before me, was this huge, giant dog thing with a wolf-like head and built like Arnold Schwarzenegger. My dog and I were petrified, stone-cold frozen, terrified. Yellow eyes, big teeth, 7 foot or larger, 400 pounds of werewolf creature growling at us. I raised my 12-gauge Remington and shot off a round of triple buckshot over the damn thing's head. Blammo! The wolf dog jumped up and violently shook. Then it ran back over the train bridge and into the swamp. We ran back up the rails to the pickup. I do recall turning at about 50 yards to fire 2 more rounds for insurance reasons. I then drove back to Crawley, Louisiana, and pulled into an Exxon gas station and told a Louisiana State Patrolman. I just almost killed a dog creature on the old railway 20 minutes ago. You did? Well, you might want to keep it to yourself. Our supervisor told us not to discuss these types of stories so the public won't be alarmed. I've seen big critters run in front of my cruiser, and they are not small animals. So, with that, I returned home and called the Louisiana wildlife people. Their response: "Sir, we don't need booty man stories and such. So, call us back if you need our assistance." I click, he hangs up the phone, and I went for a single shot of whiskey to calm my nerves. I've never returned to that area in years. I was mad at the wildlife agency, never told me of these Dogman animals in 25 years of hunting alone in the dark and desolate Louisiana bayou, so watch yourself if you are stubborn and insist on being the lone wolf type hunter. God bless and stay safe. This is the second email that gentleman sent me 2 days later. The McCaffrey poultry facility south of Shreveport, Louisiana, was invaded by numerous werewolf-type creatures recently and was witnessed by several farm workers trying to get to the chickens to devour them. One of the workers recalls the were-dog was walking upright on 2 hind legs and coming towards me. I went to the work truck and seized a shotgun to ward the thing off. It ran out of the area and into the tree line surrounding the 100-year-old farm. The McCaffrey poultry facility is south of Shreveport, Louisiana, and other pig and cattle ranches were notified to stay on alert for this creature, as there may be many more of them hunting about the backwoods and forest of North Louisiana. This encounter was reported to the State Wildlife Agency, and further information is pending as winter approaches in 2008. This isn't the first time this encounter has occurred in North Louisiana, as the state parks such as Kisatchie National Forest and areas around Fort Polk and Sam Houston State Park have had reports for decades here in the Bayou State Officials warn the general public to be cautious when camping these zones as a safety precaution. Tonight's third subscriber encounter revisited. This encounter happened a few years ago when I was 10. I have 3 encounters. This is the first one. I have family near the LBL, and I have visited for years now. The area that my grandpa lived in is heavily wooded with a long gravel driveway. I was always allowed to play outside, but my grandpa made it very clear to be in the house before sunset. I would play around the house till dusk all of the time. At the time, my grandpa had a huge German Shepherd mixed with Great Dane named Sergeant. Well, Sergeant was a protective dog who would never leave my side while I was playing. I remember playing in the back of the property, and I was kicking a soccer ball against an old tool shed with Sergeant lying down on the stone walkway. I guess time got away from me, and it was getting heavily dark. As I kicked the ball one last time, I heard a long, drawn-out growl from the right of me. It was Sergeant. His hair was standing on end, looking at the woods. As I looked, I could see a shadow of something moving around in the woods. As it drew closer, I could see its shape. It was down on all fours, staring at Sergeant. At this point, it's almost pitch black outside. I remember Sergeant starting to bark very ferociously. I guess this pissed the creature off, because it, in return, growled back at him. The vibration from the growl shook my rib cage. The animal took a step out of the tree line and bared its teeth at us. About this time, I heard a loud boom, followed by an intense ringing in my ears. My grandpa had shot at the creature. I don't remember if he hit it, but I remember it tearing back into the woods. My grandpa then pulled me back up the walkway to the porch with Sergeant following me from behind. Grandpa was very angry with me. He was yelling at me the whole time back to the house. I have never heard my grandfather yell, and I started to cry. As we entered the house, my grandma looked like she had seen a ghost, and I was sent upstairs to go to sleep. I awoke in the middle of the night to Grandpa and Grandma talking about what had happened. Grandpa said I never thought it would get that close to the house. I think I hit it this time, I'm not sure. Grandma then intervened, saying you better hope you didn't hit it. Don't you remember what happened last time you shot at it? What it did to Daisy? Daisy was an old dog that they owned a few years ago. I was always told that she just ran away from home. I picked up the pieces pretty quick. That thing butchered Daisy and left a pile of what used to be her around the house. Well, the argument started to die down between them, and about 20 minutes of them being silent and everyone starting to rest, I went back to my bedroom and tried to sleep. I think was about 2 hours of me sleeping, my body flung awake to Sergeant barking at the window. And about 35 yards up the hill looking directly at me was that creature. It had yellowish amber eyes. The pupils looked blank of compassion, only full of evil, and they were fixed on me. I couldn't move, I couldn't speak, I couldn't even breathe. Then, all of a sudden, I screamed. As soon as I did this, the creature stood on its back legs and ran further up the hill, dipping behind a ridge. My grandfather came running up the stairs with his deer rifle and flung into the room. I told him, "What is that thing?" He said it was a bear. I could tell he was lying because he was in a cold sweat and on the verge of crying. He told me not to be scared in a shaky voice and told me to go to sleep with Grandma. I awoke to the smell of bacon and eggs in the morning. Grandfather was sleeping heavily in the living room chair with his rifle in his lap looking at the door. I wasn't allowed outside for the rest of my stay, and the last 2 days of my stay were uneventful. I gave my grandpa and grandma a big hug, and my parents picked me up, and I went back home. It brings a lot of emotions back up that I tried to hide away, but the story about the LBL brought my emotions back to light. I'm literally shaking telling you this story right now. My grandfather has since passed, but my grandma is still living up at that house, and Sergeant has died as well. He lived to be about 15 years, so the old boy lived a healthy, long life. I know now why my grandparents always were so strict about the woods. I've since been told his story. If you want to hear it, let me know. Thanks, Jeff. It feels good to get that off of my chest. My best friends don't even know about this story, only my close family knows. The other two stories are when I was 16 and 18. I'm now 24, by the way. This encounter happened on the LBL. At the time, I was staying with my grandparents for about a month. During this time, I agreed to a camping trip to the LBL. The LBL is a beautiful place. The lakes are so peaceful, the trails are always nice, and nature helps clear your mind. My girlfriend at the time owned a camper. For sake of keeping her private, we'll call her Jessica. I'm an avid outdoorsman. I love nature. I have a deep respect for nature, and I will always be in the woods. Jessica, on the other hand, doesn't like the woods. She loved spending time with me. The first day was uneventful. We hiked for a little bit, then went to the lakes, and went back to the camper. The second day, Jessica and I went hiking for a little longer than we expected. We ended up back at the camper with a few hours of daylight. We sat in the camper for a little bit to gain our energy. Jessica said she wanted to see the stars at night, and me being tired from the hiking, reluctantly agreed. We exited the camper to the moonlight night and proceeded to start the almost 20-minute walk to the lakes. About 15 minutes into the walk, I noticed how silent it truthfully was. The normal sounds were absent, no crickets, no owls. Not even the wind was blowing. I didn't pay much attention to it. Me being a 16-year-old boy at the time, I was focused on one thing. We made it to the lake and had to walk down the shore a little ways. Then I set a blanket. After an hour of watching the stars, things started to heat up. I then noticed the woods and the lake were absolutely silent. Usually when the woods go silent like that, a predator is usually near. By that, not all the time true, but it's a good indicator. I started to get this overwhelming feeling of being watched. All of a sudden, that primal fear I felt to Grandpa's house came flooding back. Just about this time, Jessica pointed to the tree line and said, "I swear I just saw something big move behind that tree." I instantly jumped up and grabbed her hand and told her we needed to leave right now. She was confused and wanted answers. I knew what that thing was in the woods. I proceeded to grab her hand and pull her towards the trail. We got onto the trail, only for my worst fear to be confirmed. I looked back to the meadow to see this thing low to the ground, slowly crawling towards us. I then told Jessica we need to move faster, and I kept looking back to see where it had gone. About 2 minutes onto the trail, I looked back to see the creature getting onto the trail. I looked at Jessica and told her not to look back down the trail, and just to keep looking forward. As soon as I finished this statement, she did exactly what I told her not to do, and she saw it. Jessica became frozen in fear. I had to pull her forward to try to keep her going. The creature at this time was about 100 yards down the trail. When Jessica snapped out of it, she started to cry profusely. I tried to get her to go forward. In that 5-second window, I lost track of it. All of the senses kicked into overdrive, trying to hear or see where this thing had gone. Eventually, Jessica started moving again. We made good time, maybe 5 to 10 minutes left on the trail. My senses were at an all-time high, still trying to see if that creature was still following us. I suddenly got hit with the smell of rotten meat and dog piss adjacent to me. My heart sank when I saw its shadow maybe 15 yards off the trail. I told Jessica to move faster, and she stood still demanding answers, so I yelled at her to move faster. This shocked the creature's ears twitched like a dog's would. The creature sat there for a little bit. Then all hell broke loose. The creature stepped back onto the trail and Jessica locked eye contact with it. She froze in fear again for about 2 seconds. Jessica was standing there, frozen with fear suddenly. She screamed. This creature then stood up on its back legs to its full height and roared at us. The sheer size of the creature is out of this world. The path was easily 5 feet wide where he stood, and when I was 16, I was 6'1". I thought I was tall. This thing was easily 3 feet taller than myself. I grabbed Jessica by the hand and ran as hard as I could up that trail. I felt tears streaming down my face. I started seeing my life flash before my eyes. I thought to myself, will I ever get to see my family again? Will they ever know what happened to me? About this time, I snapped back into running. I looked up the trail and saw the trailhead. I heard that thing chasing after us. It sounded like an 18-wheeler in the forest, with a full head of steam. We burst into the clearing with Jessica hot on my heels. My lungs felt like I was breathing lava. I didn't hear it running after us when we got halfway through the clearing. We didn't stop. We kept running till we got to the camper. I slammed the door behind both of us, we're crying profusely. We sat there in silence for what felt like hours, then Jessica broke the silence by saying, "What the fuck was that thing?" in between sobbing breaths. I knew exactly what it was. I told her I didn't know. I cuddled her, trying to calm her down. For about 30 minutes of cuddling, she fell asleep. I tried to stay awake, but I fell asleep with a knife in my hand. I awoke to heavy footsteps on the gravel. My heart skipped a beat, and I heard whatever was do a large sniff and walk a few laps around the camper, then leave. I soon fell asleep again. I awoke to the sound of birds chirping. I sat there for a few minutes and heard nothing. I exited the camper and instantly got hit with the strongest smell of really old dog pee, but 50 times stronger, with bleach in it. I heard Jessica start to stir in the camper. I walked back into the camper and gave her a big kiss and told her not to talk about what happened to anybody. We gained our composure and left early in the morning. Jessica and I are still close. She's one of my best friends now. I talk with her almost every day. That happened almost 10 years ago, and we've only talked about it 2 times. She flat out refuses to talk about it to this day. I tried to ask her about it a few days ago, hoping I could get some details from her side of the story. She shot me down within seconds. As I've said, I've always loved the outdoors. I've been in the woods ever since I was 6 years old. I love hunting, fishing, and hiking. This encounter happened when I was 18. My grandpa owned a large chunk of property. We worked hard to keep the property healthy year-round. I remember learning about this buck, which was a good-sized boy at the time, a 12-pointer with a beautiful spread. I studied his scrape lines and this morning routine. The day finally came, opening morning of rifle season. I got up about 4:30 in the morning, eager to get to my stand. I hit the woods in full stride, getting to my stand hoping I could intercept the big buck on his way to his bed. The crack of dawn started to come through the trees. The birds were well and alive. The forest was active with the normal sounds until about 7. The woods went dead silent around 8. A few minutes went by, and I heard the crunching of leaves on the top of the ridge. Walking and scrape lines, the deer left. My heart started beating fast, thinking I was going to bag this monster buck. I soon realized that wasn't a deer walking towards my stand. The animal sounded too heavy to be a deer. I got an uneasy feeling, followed by a deep sense of dread and danger. I soon smelled that same smell I did a few years ago and started to panic. I felt my heart beating faster and faster. I realized I had my .270 on me with a few spare rounds in my pocket. I got a sense of confidence. The creature got about halfway down the valley, maybe 60 yards or so away from me. It didn't make a sound. I went as stiff as a board, hoping the creature wouldn't spot me. He got right in front of my stand, about 70 yards away. This creature turned and instantly locked eyes with me. I panicked. I pulled my rifle up and looked down the sight, and the creature was growling at me. The vibrations were strong enough for me to feel them through the metal bottom of the stand. I loaded a shot, and the creature's growling got even louder. My mind told me not to shoot. It won't help you, it'll piss it off even more. I lowered my rifle, and the creature started to pace around the base of the tree, where my stand was. After a few laps, the creature kept on going down the pathway. I stayed in my stand for what felt like hours. I knew the creature wasn't gone. I still had that feeling of being watched. Eventually it subsided and the wood started to come back to life. I eventually made my way down from that stand. I didn't hunt for the rest of rifle season. Looking back on it, I have zero idea on how that creature saw me or knew about me. I sprayed my scent removal kit before I entered the woods. I was wearing my camo, and I had my top of my stand covered with a blind. I felt powerless with my rifle. He knew what rifles were. I don't know how, but he definitely did. I'm still a little hesitant to enter those woods. I have never returned to that back part of that property. I only hunt the front side now. Alright guys, 3 terrifying yet amazing subscriber encounters revisited. Duh. Hopefully after I get this uploaded, I'm going to send an email out and all 3 of these subscribers agree to come on. If not, one would be truly amazing. If any of you guys have a encounter or some sort of experience with these cryptids, Dogman, werewolf, Sasquatch, send me an email. I can either narrate it or I can have you on the program and you can tell it in your words. Once again, my email is in the description below. I want to thank everybody for all of the support and just stay safe, guys. And with that, I'm going to bid you farewell.